Your attention, masters, mistresses. All systems functional for the Everything Geek podcast.
Hey, this is Rich McDonald, and I play Commander David Mason on Call of Duty Black Ops 2. And you're listening to Everything Geek podcast.
Hey, it's James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Master Plo Koon in Star Wars The Clone Wars, and you're listening to Everything Geek, the podcast.
Hey, it's Leif Gamfert. I played Uncle Ben's killer in The Amazing Spider-Man, and you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast.
Hello, I'm Simon Fisherbecker. You probably know me better as Dorian Moldavar from Doctor Who, or the Fat Friar from Harry Potter. And this is Everything Geek podcast.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot with the Everything Geek podcast.
You're listening to the Everything Geek podcast, bringing you interviews from your favorite films and TV shows every week, and all of the latest news. Here's your host, Ruari Williamson.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast. I'm your host, Ruari, and joining me today is two very special guests. I have producers Douglas Sloan and Art Brown, best known as the showrunners, executive producers and writers on Dragons Race to the Edge, Dragons Riders of Berk and Dragons Dawn of the Dragon Racers. How are you both doing today?
Excellent.
We're doing great. How's everybody out there doing?
Hello, everybody. Nice to speak to you. Hope we can be helpful and have a good.
Yeah, I'm sure you will be. It's a pleasure to have you, both of you, join us on the podcast today.
Pleasure to be here.
And I apologize if I confuse myself sometimes by either saying you or both, because this is my first double interview, so no pressure.
We get confused all the time, so don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, great. So getting right into my first question for both of you, and I want to kind of find out a little bit of both of your backgrounds. So how did you both decide you wanted to become producers?
For me, it was, I was a writer for many years, and I had always been writing, and then just one day there was a producer's opening at the place I was working, which was Saban.
This is Doug talking.
This is Doug, by the way. And the show was called Power Rangers, and it, this was many, many years ago. And one day I was a writer, and the next day I was the executive producer of Power Rangers. And that's literally how I became a producer. I didn't know what went into it. I don't know what I was doing, but I learned very quickly what went into being a producer.
And Doug and I actually we started out as actors. We met in acting class in the late 80s, and we each sort of had our own separate producing careers. With other writing partners, and but we've been great friends ever since then, and we always wanted to work together. And so I had gone off and written some bigger like studio movies, wasn't really in the TV world, and Doug had done did after Power Rangers, did a bunch of Disney Channel movies and all that. And when we finally had the opportunity to work together, we jumped at it, and we have been working together probably about, I don't know,
12 years or
12
so.
years or so, yeah.
It's very interesting, and that's something else aside from Dragons that you both have in common, is you've both worked on Power Rangers, which is a fun fact as well.
Well, Doug was the showrunner of Power Rangers, and he just threw me a bone and gave me a couple of scripts when I was struggling.
You always got to help your friends out. But yeah, that was my first real big job, was working on that show. And everything, a lot of what I know today I learned back then, because it was sort of like trial by fire. It was very quick. You had no money to produce the episodes, or very little money, and you just had to do the best you could.
It's very interesting that you also mentioned that you did acting as well. I mean, you've done so many seasons of Dragons, and you haven't been tempted to give yourself a voice role at some point?
Well, this is art. I directed the records, so I sort of get the acting feel through that. Doug does really good voices. He does really good accents and stuff. I unfortunately wasn't given that gift, so we've talked about him doing some stuff here and there, but it's just,
but every time we start to think about it, we think that there's actors out there who struggle to get jobs, and for us to take, or for me to take a job away from an actor who's worked his whole life just doesn't seem fair. So we always, unless it's, we always try to give the jobs to actors who are real actors, who are that's their living, that's how they survive.
And quite honestly, with our show, because it's 3D, we don't have a lot of like guest starring roles or stuff like that. It's literally, if we're gonna cast new people, it's gonna be a new kid or a new villain. And when you have people like Alfred Molina
and Mark Hamill
and that sort of stuff, and May, she's a girl obviously, but like Mae Whitman and
Adelaide
Kane and those types of people, they're terrific, and it's awesome to have them be a part of the show.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people have come to us and wanted to do parts on the show. It's astounding. I think it just it signals that a lot more people watch the show that are not just kids, that are grown-ups, because these people know the show and they want to be on the show.
And a lot of people, like you have actors like David Tennant, for example. His body of work is ridiculous, and he's such an amazing actor. And this show, the ability of us to be able to expand his character, because his character didn't really appear in the movies, and for us to be able to expand him, he actually has told us a few times that because he has got kids, so this show is finally giving him validation with his own kids.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you have actors who have kids who are fans of the show, and if they get an opportunity to be involved, they really jump at it.
It's really interesting, and it's kind of weird to think that Tennant did the validation with his kids.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
That's from a foreign audience.
Yeah, he's he's a genius, and every time we work with him, it just blows our minds. But he loves, his kids love the show. And
we have a lot of really wonderful people that work on the show. Him being one of them, just couldn't be a nicer guy.
Yeah.
So moving on to my next question. Now, of course, we've got a bit of backstory now of how you both became producers, but I also wanted to find out, how were both of you originally hired to be the showrunners of Dragons Riders of Berk, the first Dragons show you did?
It was interesting because we actually were up for the job initially, and it came down to us and another team of writers, and we actually didn't get the job initially. And they asked us if we would come on as like co-EPs and basically write on the show. And we decided we would do it for a year. We, figured it would be fun.
We would not normally take jobs as writers. We like to produce things that we work on. But the property was so amazing. Dragons was just such an amazing thing to be involved with, that we decided, we got to do this job. So,
and then within, I don't know, about 8 months or so, some things went down, and they promoted us to showrunner, and we've been doing it ever since. So it's one of those stories where sometimes you don't know why something comes across your path or why a certain door opens, and we were just flexible and open enough to want to be involved in the project, and it turned out to be a great thing in the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I didn't actually know that you didn't start off as showrunners and that just came up later, so it's really interesting to learn that.
Totally.
So, moving on to my third question, and I will apologize in advance. The next few are a bit long-winded because,
That's okay.
yeah,
We're long-winded too, so we're fine.
yeah, that I like to hear that. So, next up, your involvement in the How to Train Your Dragon franchise started with Dragon's Riders of Berk on Cartoon Network, as we were just talking about, before creating the current show Race to the Edge for Netflix. When you both originally decided to do a new show, what were the biggest challenges and the things that had you excited about developing Race to the Edge?
Probably the biggest challenge for us was we had to decide whether we were, because there's like 5 years that passes between the first movie and the second movie, we had to decide if we were going to age the kids up to closer to the second movie than the Cartoon Network series, which was close to the first movie. And I think that was challenging for us both on a writing level and a production level.
We had to create all new models of the characters, and things. We just had to change a lot of things, and the characters' voices had to be aged up a little bit, and
then just going to Netflix with what has been a very high quality standards with them. We wanted to, as we do every season, we feel an obligation to the fans to constantly be pushing the boundaries of storytelling and visual storytelling. And so we just knew that creating a new series for Netflix was going to sort of require us all to really, really bring our A game.
And truth be told, I think Netflix wanted a new series that was for them, that was the Netflix version, and you could look at it and identify it as the Netflix version of Dragons. And I think aging the kids up was the first step in really securing that.
And developing the idea of the Dragon's Edge was huge because it's the kids being off on their own, and that was big because up until then it had always been with adults around, and that really creates wish fulfillment for our viewers. So having that and creating the Dragon Eye and that whole mystery behind that, and really giving it that feel of almost kids going off to college and being on their own for the first time, all those things really played a big part.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense what you were saying as well, with essentially giving it the Netflix version its own stamp and making it feel different from the Cartoon Network show. Because I remember when I saw the first episode of Race to the Edge, like I could identify it as your work, but it felt very fresh and unique at the same time. I felt like that was part of the Netflix thing as well. Like, I remember on the first episode I watched it and I'm like, this is kind of a lot darker than the Cartoon Network version. Like, I mean, there were differences, but I immediately was like, it's a bit darker in what they're saying. And I remember, like, there was close-ups of dragon skulls in the first Race to the Edge episode, and I'm like, wow.
I think it's both, though. I think we're able to be edgier. As we don't really look at it as darker, we look at it as being edgier. But at the same time, we think that it's also much funnier. So it's sort of across the board that when you raise the stakes and raise the level of storytelling, it's across the board. You're having it dramatically, you're having it from an action perspective, and you're having it comedically.
And our audience too has grown up with the show, and they're ready for more edgy stuff. They're ready to see more. They're ready to hear more. It's like the Harry Potter books did that brilliantly, as the books grew with the audience. And that's sort of what we tried to do with Dragons as well.
And even if you take something like Rough and Tough, there's only so much of them like beating each other over the head that you can do. So you have to constantly be creating new ways to engage them and make them funny and create wackiness.
Right.
In this upcoming season, we have basically a musical episode. So pushing the boundaries of that and talking the executives into letting us do that because we know the fans will like it. Those are also challenges that we had to face.
It's really interesting, and a musical episode. I can't wait to see that.
It actually came out really well. It's not
a musical in the sense that, everyone sings. It's not a musical in the sense of musicals, but it's a singing episode, and just the level, it's just really funny. It turned out to be, it's one of our favorite episodes in this 13.
Yeah, because it turns out that some of our actors can actually really sing.
Yeah.
Like the kid who plays Snot Loud, Zach, is a great singer. And so
Mae Whitman.
And Mae Whitman is an amazing singer. She plays Heather. So it was really cool for us to sort of take advantage of that those talents.
And of course, the twins are horrible singers, but really funny.
Yeah.
I bet the cast members had a lot of fun with that episode in any case.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
They did. They had a blast.
And talked of course about the biggest challenges, but what excited you initially about developing Race to the Edge?
I think telling edgier stories. I think being able to develop the show along, to keep pushing the envelopes of storytelling, and visually, like we said earlier, our visual effects supervisor, David Jones, always tells us keep writing stories that we can't produce because we always find a way to do it. And that pushes him to create new systems and do new things for television that have previously been cost prohibitive.
And we had an idea of what we wanted to do. The Dragon Eye was something we've always wanted to do. Ever since we started working on the show, we sort of had a picture of it up on our wall. And we'd never really been able to do it. And finally, with this whole new switch over to Netflix and the aging up and stuff like that, it was the perfect opportunity to introduce that into the mythology of the show. And so for that, we were really sort of excited about it because we've gotten so much mileage out of that. It's just become this awesome centerpiece to the series.
And also, our show takes place our whole season should take place between the first and second movie. So once the second movie came out, the target and where we could go was more clear to us. It was a little more vague before the second movie came out. So a lot of times we were told we couldn't do this kind of story or that, but we didn't really know why. Once that second movie came out, we were excited because we had a clear path of what we could do and where we could take the kids and where we weren't allowed to go, but where we could go.
We sort of knew the finish line, and whatever we did before the finish line was okay as long as we got to the finish line.
Got back to.
We always knew where the finish line was because we had to end up at the beginning of the second movie. So whatever we did in between the beginning of our series and the end of our series, it was going to end up being the beginning of the second movie. So, there was opportunity for us to, for example, the flight suit, to develop the flight suit, to develop the dragon blade.
All those origin stories.
All the origin stories we got to tell, which was awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And moving on to my next question. The second season of Race to the Edge introduced new villains, the Dragon Hunters, led by Vigo and Riker Grimborn, on top of returning villain Dagur. Was having three villains at the same time ever a concern for either of you, or were you confident that your plans for each character wouldn't undermine the others?
I don't think so. As these seasons go, you're kind of as good as your villain, and Dagur is such a great character, and David Faustino does such a great job. So we knew going into this that it would be cool to start to make him more of an ally and really develop his story. At the same time, you've got to create a new villain that's fresh and that the audience will like, and it's not repetitive. And so the idea of Vigo and Riker, we loved from the start that Vigo was a much more intellectual villain for Hiccup. And as opposed, you went from Alvin, which wasn't really a peer villain, that was really Stoic's villain. And then Dagur became more of a peer villain for Hiccup. And then to take Vigo into another sort of realm was exciting for us. And, we knew, we did it on purpose. So, as you create a new season, you need certain things that are your big ideas for the season that keep the audience excited and keep them guessing on where you're going. So it was never a concern for us. It was more exciting for us.
It's a really interesting answer, and it's especially interesting, of course, because Vigo comes in like an episode before we have a bit of a change with Dagur, which I will get to now with my next question. So one of my favorite moments in Riders of Berk, which of course was the first Dragons show you both did, was when Alvin turns from a villain into an anti-hero. The second season finale of Race to the Edge seemingly hints that Dagur is going to head down a similar path when he frees Heather. Was some form of redemption always your plan for Dagur on this show? And not sure if you can talk about this particular bit or not, but I'll ask it anyway and we'll find out. How did you approach this plot to avoid making it seem like Alvin's redemption all over again?
Well, the thing about Dagur is that because he is related to Heather, it's a much more personal connection. So it's a family thing, which takes it a much deeper level than Alvin. Alvin has history with the Berkians in that he grew up on Berk, and him and Stoic fought for control and all this. But with Dagur and Heather, it's blood. It's a much, much deeper thing. It's, they're actually brother and sister. So how do they,
And I think the difference between Alvin and, again, Alvin was more like Stoic's nemesis.
Right.
Dagur is Hiccup's nemesis. And I think what you'll find in this group of 13 episodes is Alvin sort of happened in an episode or two at the end
right.
of a couple of seasons. Dagur's is a much more involved, him trying to change as a human being, not just be a good guy. It's really his, and it starts in episode 201 that you guys will see. It's a really fun episode with Hiccup and Dagur. It's really the sort of the beginnings, I should say, of Dagur's transformation, which takes quite a while, and
yeah,
it's hard to shed that skin.
And it's because he's conflicted and has this personal relationship, and his only family, his only connection is Heather. And so how does he deal with that? How does he, reconcile that with his life of killing people and stealing and plundering?
And if you look back at Dagur, even when he's a bad guy, he's a very likable bad guy. Like he's funny, he's crazy, but the question becomes, where Alvin was a bad guy turned good, the question that we will hopefully answer with Dagur is, was he truly a bad guy turned good, or was he never really, was he always a good guy playing a bad guy in his own skin?
For us, it's always more interesting when the villain has some sort of comedic sort of thing to him. I will never forget when I was doing Power Rangers, we had a villain come in that was much more comedic than usual. And for us, it was fantastic. I mean, it was like, it just gives it a whole different breadth of character and stuff like that. we think it's much more interesting when the villain is someone you can not only laugh at but you're terrified of and has a distinct, unique personality, and that's what's so great about Dagur.
And you want him to be likable.
Yeah.
Even though he's a villain, you want to understand why he's villainous.
Yeah.
And you want and if you can and you can like him at the same time that you dislike him, I think that's really fun for the fans. And David Faustino does a fantastic job. You know, we write it, but he brings it to life, and he is so gifted and funny and crazy, and
which you can say for all the actors. I mean, T.J. Miller, who plays Tough Nut, you know, we write 60 to 75% of what's there, and then he fills in the rest. He's just brilliant. You know, that character wouldn't be what it is without TJ.
TJ will riff on stuff and have us all in stitches, and it's a pleasure to work with him.
I guess you could say he toughens up the script. I couldn't resist that one. I apologize for that.
Freaks over
we love
here.
puns.
Yeah. But what I was really going to say before that came to my mind and then my mouth is, I think that's a really great explanation with Dagur and how it's different to Alvin, because family has always been such an important theme in the How to Train Your Dragon franchise. And especially in the last episode of the previous 13, of course, it's the next 13 this Friday, but in the last episode of the previous 13, like, I remember Dagur had a conversation with Riker, and Riker is basically like he wouldn't kill Vigo just because Vigo's his brother, which I think really, you know, goes very deep into the whole family thing particularly, and so it makes a lot of sense what you're saying with why Dagur frees Heather and why Dagur might be changing.
And even just the fact, you know, that it's that Dagur likes to call Hiccup brother. It's not like he's, you know, we're not going to like reveal that they're related, but that yearning to have a connection family-wise for him is what that's about. It's funny and all that, but Dagur really, in his own way, cares for Hiccup.
Yeah,
deeply.
And that's, to Netflix credit, they have allowed us to make the show much deeper than it's ever been. On when it was before, when the kids were younger, they've allowed us to explore all these relationships to as deep as we wanted to go with them. And, you know, we were really never given the green light to do that until we took the show to Netflix, and they have, you know, to their credit, have just let us tell those stories, which have been gifts, because, you know, the deeper you go and the more personal you get, the better the story's going to be.
Definitely. So my next question, the Dragon Eye has been an integral part of Race to the Edge and the Dragon Riders since its introduction. Was it always your intention that Hiccup and the other riders would lose it at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, look, the Dragon Eye represents who has it has power. And I think the idea is thematically of the Dragon Eye in the right hands is a wonderful thing, and the Dragon Eye in the wrong hands is a dangerous thing. So I think it's inevitable that when you create something like that, it's going to switch hands, because you don't truly know the dangers of it until you see it in the wrong person's hands.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. So, moving on to my next question, this one a bit more open-ended. What else can fans look forward to in the third season of Race to the Edge this Friday?
Well, you will be able to see the musical, or see and hear the musical, which we think is one of our best episodes. It's really, really funny. There's
lots of dragons as usual.
Yep.
Lots of new dragons.
Yep.
There's some really cool ones coming. The Cavern Crasher, the Singe Tail. You know, there's also the Triple Strike. The Singe Tail and the triple strike will play out in future seasons. So those introductions
are very, very important dragons.
Yeah, and those are ones to keep an eye on because they have bigger stories ultimately attached to them. You also see Dagur get his first dragon.
Yep.
Which is really cool and hilarious. You'll see how Gobber got Grump. And in terms of story, you'll really see, the how the Dagur Heather Riders story plays out. You'll see some good emotional stuff between Hiccup and Astrid. You'll see some more Tough Nut and Chicken, who's a favorite. We love Chicken so much.
Chicken's one of our favorite characters.
And that's been a great time to.
And Adelaide Kane, who's on the show Rain.
We introduced a new tribe.
We introduced a new tribe with, and she's part of that.
Called the Defenders of the Wing, and that is something to really look forward to. She's
amazing,
fantastic,
just awesome,
great human being, fantastic actress.
Yeah,
that's a lot to look forward to, and I have to ask as well. Actually, now that you mentioned it, the chicken, are we going to hear it randomly speak again in Tuff's mind?
I think we toy with it a little bit. I don't remember in this.
I think it would
13.
be.
I think that was. There's some great stories to look forward to with Chicken.
Yeah. But we haven't written the end of the series, so
yeah,
it would be a shame to not hear.
Yeah, even if it's just in his head. I mean, that was a great thing about that episode is we were able to do that because it was in this wacky state of mind and it stayed within our sort of rules of reality, which we have. But we will give a shout out to Angela Bardis on that because Angela does a lot of good work for us on the show. She does a lot of our scratch recordings for us, and it was nice to have her play Chicken. That was a fun time for her.
Yep, something she proudly will put on her resume.
Yeah.
The voice of Chicken.
Who doesn't want to?
Is such a funny love relationship between Tough Nut and Chicken, and there's some really fun stuff ahead.
After all, who doesn't want to say they voiced a chicken?
I mean,
that's right.
It's a proud moment.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of excellent teasers for this season. I'll have to listen back to this interview afterwards and, so I can digest them all. Yeah. But lots to look forward to for sure. So, my final question for you both is, aside from the upcoming season of Dragon's Race to the Edge, and of course you mentioned you're still finishing up the scripts for the rest of the show, do either of you have any other upcoming projects that you would like to talk about?
Well, we'd love to talk about them. Unfortunately, we can't. We definitely are coming to the end of our Dragons, our time here on Dragons. It's been 5 years, and it's been amazing. And the next stuff, you'll see stuff coming from us soon.
Yeah, new chapters.
Different. We've got a bunch of things in development, and it'll be tough to top this experience, but we are sure going to try. But we'll keep you posted. How's that?
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to hear about those projects and whatever is coming up for both of you eventually.
Absolutely.
Considering I did technically say that was my last question, but you brought up something else I should probably ask, because you mentioned your time on Dragons is coming to an end. If you had to look back on your 5 years, what would you say is the happiest memory you've had?
Wow.
That's a tough one.
I think the most lasting memories for us usually revolve around fans, the kids. You know, we've been able to do things. There was a kid who we were able to help. His father, he was in a wheelchair, and his dad would each Halloween would create around the wheelchair would literally create a character, and we found out about it when we were able to put him in touch and help out his dad with our art team and help him because he wanted to do a Toothless. So it's things like that, honestly, that really stick out for us, always involving the fans, especially the kids.
It's weird with TV because you don't get that instant reaction, and especially with Netflix, because they don't go by a rating system or anything. They just put the show up there and people download it. And, you know, so for us to be face to face with a kid or a mom or someone who loves the show, and it happens, you know, it happens often, is that the parents will come up to you and say, God, that my kids love that show and we love watching it with our kids. And to us, that's the absolute number one greatest thing that anyone could say to us, because our goal is to produce a show that a family can share together, that parents aren't going to pull their hair out that they have to watch, but that they can enjoy with their kids, because there aren't that many of those shows left. And for us, if we can do that, that's everything.
And also that the parents, that they can talk to their kids about the themes in the show, they can talk about it afterwards, and even that they know that their kid is if they're busy doing something else and their kid is in front of the TV watching our show, that we got them, and they're safe, and they're entertained.
There's nothing there that we wouldn't show to our kids, and you know, there's nothing that parents have to worry about, because you know, our show is edgy but wholesome, and you know, we really care about our fans.
It's a really great answer. So that's all of my questions for both of you. Douglas and Art, it's been a pleasure talking to you both on the podcast.
Thank you so much for asking us. We are delighted to talk to you, and
thanks all you guys out there for watching. We'll continue to make to surprise you, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this next 13 episodes, which is Friday the 24th, this Friday.
Yeah, and if you have any comments or questions or whatever, you know, we're on social media. There's a Dragons Facebook page. Both Art and I are on Twitter. You can tweet us.
And we're doing a live blogging tweet event on Friday the 24th when the show airs, and it's at 5 o'clock our time, I believe.
5 o'clock Pacific time
is when we'll be watching the show, and we'll be live tweeting. I think we're going to watch episode 201 along with the fans. Obviously, they'll have, you know, the show will have been out all day, but we're going to have some actors there, some artists there, and we welcome people to jump on in. If you go to the Dragons Facebook page or DreamWorks, you can find more information about that.
So we're out there.
We'll be around Friday afternoon our time, so if anybody wants to join in, please, welcome.
Yeah, that's definitely very exciting, and hopefully I can talk to you both again at some point.
Absolutely.
So I'll talk to you both again soon. Bye, and thanks again for joining me.
Thanks again.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So that was our interview with producers Douglas Sloan and Art Brown. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. Yeah, definitely two very talkative people. They weren't kidding when they said earlier they were long-winded, but that's perfectly great. And lots of excellent teasers for the next 13 episodes of Dragons Race to the Edge. And, of course, those 13 episodes, otherwise known technically as the third season of Dragons Race to the Edge, will be released on Netflix this Friday. So after all of those teasers, I'm now more curious than ever to see those 13. So time to wrap up today's show. Make sure to check out our podcast links Check out our website.everythinggeekpodcast.com/EGP. Check out our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/everythinggeekpodcast. Check out our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/user/everythinggeekcast. Check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/everythinggeekp. Check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/official Everything Geek Podcast. Check out our Mixcloud profile, www.mixcloud.com/Everything Geek Podcast. Email us at the following email, everythinggeekpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our companion podcast, Everything Geek Comic Cast, www.facebook.com/Everything Geek Comic Cast. Make sure to check out the host's YouTube channels. Mine is www.youtube.com/user/Cephalus Destroyers. Check out Douglas Sloan and Art Brown on their Twitter profiles respectively. Douglas's is twitter.com/VORDJS143 and Art's is twitter.com/RTEBrown. And check out Channel 138 we broadcast live from www.channel138.com. So geeks out, everyone.
I have been just, again, so blessed to work on all these great things and some of the biggest franchises in the world, from Transformers to Star Wars to, Jurassic Park or Back to the Future. I mean, it's really cool.
My first voice acting gig was when I was 11 years old, and it really wasn't as much of deciding to do it as they were looking for local kids, and I got hired to do that, and that was Fruits